Thank you for watching Conscious Consumer Network. The live stream broadcast is free to view. You can pause and rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
Everybody, my name is Cengiz Köroğlu. I was born in Kosovo, ex-Yugoslavia, but 25 years ago or so I moved to Istanbul, Turkey, where I graduated university, journalism and mass communications. But I worked all the time as a studio and a tour musician, a recording and a mixing engineer, a music producer, a music educator, and so on, ever since I came to Istanbul. I learned about the Venus Project around, I think, year 2009. I got strongly interested and started studying all the related materials which I could find online, and as more and more audio and video recordings were becoming available, I studied more and more, got interested more and more, and gradually and eventually got involved more and more. I took the responsibility of acting as a point of contact for Turkey since 2015, and of course after finishing the orientation process. Also, I work with Linguistic Team International, LTI, the translation house for the Venus Project related materials. Today I'd like to expand on the topic of transition, probably the most problematic area, the great, how do we get from here to there question. Our volunteer friend Stan Azin also covered this topic, but I'll try to look at it from a different perspective. So very basically, when we talk about transition, we mean transitioning from a money-based nationalistic economies which are not able to solve the perpetual problems of war, poverty, hunger, unnecessary human suffering, economic booms and busts, perpetual race to win over one another, destruction of the planet and so forth, to a resource-based world economy which is the only holistic and global and intelligent system which has developed serious, viable solutions to most of the big problems we face today. Now, since most of us are brought up with fairy tales and fictitious movies and books, it is very likely that when presented with a complex new concept, which is actually not there yet physically, our brain's associative systems will associate the concept with a nice but distant, impossible, too good to be true, fictitious story. It takes some study of the materials, cross-checking and validating the arguments and ideas in order to grasp how serious and realistic and viable the proposals of the Venus Project are. There is a brief description of the transition on the venusproject.com website, which I want to shortly outline before I proceed. It consists of three main phases. 1. Building a research center, which is completed. 2. Making a major motion picture about life in a resource-based economy. 3. Building a real physical test city according to TVP proposals and test the validity of the whole thing. My father once told me a story about an architect who would bend down his head every time when passing through a certain point in an open-air city square. He was appointed to build a big building on that square. He had it so finished in his head that he actually saw it standing there, and he would bend down to avoid hitting his head against some wall of that building. Musicians also often hear partially or fully developed melodies and songs in their heads before they are actually played, recorded and made possible to be heard by the public. The Phase 1 Research Center in Florida is nowhere near a fully realized TVP city system, which is described only to a degree in the documentaries. There are only some of the small-scale models of it there. It is only when the third stage is completed that something physical will be there for people to experience and see firsthand. Until then, each one of us has to learn and construct the system inside our heads through carefully examining the descriptive materials of the Venus Project. So I submit to you that that's where the transition starts, inside one's head. So TVP has no control over mainstream media, no resources or money on a scale, global scale that is needed to accomplish the goals. So whether those goals can be accomplished or not heavily depends on voluntary efforts of us normal people. In other words, it depends on your efforts too, dear listeners, to make it clear for ourselves which way we want to go. Do we want to stay in an endless cycle of emotional ups and downs, which is just a small game given to us by this system to keep us busy and immersed in order to perpetuate the same system, which is really working for only a small minority? Or do we really want to take a path out and be a part of achieving something really big, historically big? The illusion that is created and perpetuated by the means of today's established system can be so convincing that most people, although they feel very unhappy, don't even realize what is wrong and what is missing. If you are one of those who want to take the path out, here is what I would suggest. First, let's get rid of the assumption that by watching a few documentaries one can understand how the system will work or not work. By looking at the surface, one will just most probably get a highly inaccurate picture. Second, let's get rid of the sweet notion that everybody else but us is going to build a better world for us while we comfortably sit and wait. Third, let's study deeper, more TVP materials and be prepared for some really brain ache, but don't be upset because you probably experience the brain ache a great deal anyway, so why not experience it for a big useful thing? By volunteering for TVP, I get to know many people who are experiencing the transition, for whom the transition is already up and running, me being one of them. So here is a little bit about how it goes until the first city is built. I divided my experiences into categories and named them, so I'll just go through them quickly and later I will expand a little bit more in detail. So there is transitioning the focus, transitioning the emotions, transitioning the time, transitioning the use of language, transitioning out of conflict areas, transitioning from feel-good things to useful things, being careful not to transition too much, and being careful not to transition too fast. So let's go through every one of them one by one. So hi after the break. Now I want to talk about transitioning the focus. What I mean by that, I mean if we really want to change the system, if we really want to transition to a resource-based economy, we need to start to change the things which are in our focus. Think of the things that are in our focus today. Are they really things that you want to focus in, or are they only distractions, things that are forced to your focus by the marketing and the propaganda machine that's working all around you? Is the louder and more popular thing really more important or more worth your focus? Or is it just something that someone with enough money and power superimposes on you, so you think it's important? Why do many people feel a politician's speech is so important, or a football game is so important? Is it really politician's speech more important, or a long row of people waiting outside the hospital to get in and be taken care of? Is it the celebrities as really all that important? So I'd say if we want a change in the world, we must start by transitioning our focus to things that matter, that count. The next subject I want to mention is transitioning the emotions. From a different point of view, you can think of some of the TVP material as a great deal of highly useful advices from a good old grandpa who seriously cares about you. This particular grandpa, Jacques, of course, which will make Roxanne a grandma in this context, these two people are people who are emotionally connected to all people, all life, and the planet itself on which we depend upon, like no other. It's just that they don't write emotional poems about it, but instead they work on eliminating the problems technically. So it may appear that they are too cold, for the lack of a better word. Nobody likes their kids getting killed in a car accident, right? But what is the point of getting emotional about it when nothing is changing? Keep getting emotional and kids keep dying in accidents, wars, etc. We have to learn to convert our emotions into actions of solving problems, not just sit and wait and experience these emotions and do nothing. After I realized this, my understanding of being emotional and caring changed. I find TVP more emotional than anything else. What counts is doing something with emotions, not just sit and feel them. The next subject I want to mention is transitioning the time. Well, people say not enough time for doing useful things. Well, think of all the time you spend on complaining, time lost by getting caught into endless arguments that lead nowhere and damage your nerves, time lost on watching TV propaganda and nonsense, time lost in arguing about this or that politician, time lost in devastating arguments with a girlfriend, boyfriend, to mention a few. All this time can be transitioned to useful things that can make a big difference. Next, there is transitioning the use of language. General semantics is a practical tool that will help you modify the language you use in order to effectively avoid getting caught in or trigger useless verbal or written arguments. I don't mean becoming an expert on general semantics, but implementing just a few tips will make a big difference. It surely did for me. Look it up. Next, I want to talk about transitioning out of conflict areas. And I'll use what I think is the biggest conflicting area of today as an example of what I mean by this. The conflict between scientific worldview and the religious/spiritual worldview. We have to learn how to respect each other. I mean, religious people, how to respect atheist people or scientific people or whatever. or vice versa. Vast majority of religious people I know are not harmful at all. In fact, I find that religious people are those who respond most positively when approached with respect and understanding. I wouldn't call myself a religious person today, but I grew up in a highly Muslim-oriented family and practiced a lot of Muslim customs for many years. I went through a period of New Age spiritualism too. I'd say none of those teachings are bad or wrong as a whole. It's more about learning which aspects of them might be harmful or serve no useful purpose. I feel it is overly naive to wait for the politicians to solve these kind of big conflicts for us. Instead, we can learn how to bridge the difference ourselves. That way, the problem will eventually be phased out. I find more spirituality in the Venus Project than in anything else, the kind of spirituality that works in the physical world, the kind that I need the most in order to deal with real problems in my life. Even different religious/spiritual interpretations have endless conflicting arguments about which is the real religion or spiritualism. I find that TVP has more aspects in common with all religions than most other conflicting religious interpretations have between themselves. Interestingly, I never heard Jacques saying there is no God. Instead, I heard him say many times, "What if there is no God?" which is quite different. The first one is a claim with no evidence. The second one is a question, one of basic questions in the scientific method. I also heard him say about Big Bang Theory, considered as the beginning of everything, how do you know it's the beginning? How do you know it's not the end? Which again does not state that it is true or false. It merely states that it is unclear. So I submit that TVP is not dismissing anyone's God, it is merely dismissing the speculative areas and low-grade stories about gods that are widely used today to manipulate and take advantage of masses of people. On the other hand, the bit about the relation of science and TVP is merely emphasizing the methods of science which have proven to provide far better tools for solving real-life problems than any other system. This simply means learning to say "I don't know," measuring, testing the best you know how, before concluding that things are so. Not that science is perfect or the ultimate truth or something. In TVP, only the methods of science are promoted, not the scientists themselves, especially not as they are today. It is evident that they are just random, ordinary, sometimes even ignorant people outside their specialized field who can do detrimental things to society and the planet just like any other person. In fact, if you listen to Jacques' description of a scientist, you would agree that there are almost no scientists in the world today, just like there are almost no Christians or Muslims or similar. It is highly unlikely that we will see any in the present-day monetary system. Money is too much involved in everything, including religion, spirituality. So I feel the only place we would see who is truly religious would be a resource-based economy. Next, I want to talk about transitioning from feel-good things to useful things. I think of this bit as becoming responsible, growing up enough to take on some responsibility about the things that bother you about the world, instead of passing them to some leaders, managers, politicians, and so forth. Jacques Fresco lectures definitely made me grow up in this sense. I learned to differentiate the plain feel-good things from things that count and really make a difference. If we really want to make the transition to a resource-based economy, more people have to study those lectures and take them seriously and apply that knowledge. Imagine getting to a point where society widely talks about and applies TVP and RBE concepts in everyday social life, just like soccer is applied and talked about today, or politics or soap operas. Why not talk about these concepts just normally in everyday life, in a cafe, in a restaurant, in the street, with friends? There is nothing to be afraid of. I am doing this for years now. All the other volunteers are doing it too, and it does not ruin our lives at all. On the contrary, it has become a feel-good thing for us, while being a useful thing at the same time. I recommend it to everyone. Next, I want to say, beware of too much transition. I see people who like TVP very much and they want to get things going fast. It is very important not to transition the efforts too much by getting overly enthusiastic, because present-day system is harsh, competitive. Monetary system can swallow people. I mean, getting carried away by volunteering, chasing ideals and such can make one's life go economically bankrupt. In the monetary system, most of us have to do long hours of work, so we can barely sustain ourselves without getting into debt and all kinds of problems. Everybody should find that delicate balance between the monetary system performance and volunteering performance. And next, I want to say, beware of transitioning too fast. And by fast I mean people that decide that they know all about TVP RB by watching a few documentaries. This can lead to spin-offs from the main direction. We are already seeing this happening. We are seeing small eco-village communities, hybrid RBE concepts, veganism or atheism being confused with TVP. TVP, resource-based economy, needs people united and working in collaboration toward the very well-defined holistic and global goals, and not dispersed in many different interpretations. Again, this is due to limited study and grasping of TVP materials. Think of TVP as studying a very different university that gives a great deal of knowledge, highly connected to real life, unlike most schools today. That's what I find it to be, an alternative online university. Getting really serious about TVP requires going through Socio-Cyberneering Education Project, SAP, which takes at least 2 years. Now, why do that? Well, even for those of you that like to think in the monetary system terms, like what's in it for me type of thing, I submit that you will get more out than you put in. Most likely, you will experience less fights, less paranoia, less ego problems, maintain much better overall mental health, become a better problem solver, understand people much better, understanding the world around you much better, finding more meaning in life. And I think that would be what I mean by transition for today, transition inside the head. Otherwise, I don't see how a major motion picture and a TVP city can be made. A movie will certainly not shoot itself, a city will certainly not build itself. So I feel it's about time to cut the crap, get serious, and do useful things that make a difference, be it small or big. Every little bit counts if it's in the same direction. I'm talking at least to those of you who care. And as a side note, getting responsible and serious doesn't mean there is no entertainment. In fact, I find this experience most entertaining. So, come join us for changing the world for the better, for all living things and the planet itself, and experience the first generation of RBE-like collaborative community. Bye everybody.
If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire: the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017. Help keep CCN on the air by supporting the 2017 Network Support Fund.